The courtroom smelled of varnished oak and tension. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting sharp shadows across the pews like claws scratching the walls. The room was silent, save for the occasional shuffle of patent leather shoes and the muted thud of a nervous heart. Hers. Eliza Monroe stepped through the double doors as if entering a cathedral of judgment, her heels echoing like a countdown. In her left palm, she clutched a tiny gray puffball, no larger than a quail's egg, soft as ash, frayed at the edges. It dangled from an old keychain she hadn't meant to bring but couldn't let go of. It was all she had. The last thread connecting her to something tender, something before him. She did not look up. Her eyes were trained on the floor, not the people, not the defendant, not the jury, not the rows of strangers, nor the tall man with folded arms seated between two defense attorneys, and certainly not the man sitting still, so still he might have been carved from ice. Damian Cross. The judge's voice pierced the silence like a warning bell. Eliza Monroe, please take the stand. Her feet moved before she felt them. Her fingers rubbed the puffball, thumb circling its worn edge. Each step brought her closer to the raised seat under the flickering light bulb. A stage. A trap. Someone in the front row whispered, but the words died in the air. Eliza's shoulder twitched. Her eyes still hadn't risen past waist height. Her knees quivered. She sat. Her blazer was 3 years out of date, slightly loose from weight lost in silence. Her hair was pinned back, but tendrils had fallen loose, framing her cheeks like trembling curtains. She kept her hands clasped in her lap, the puffball resting between them. Then came the oath. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? She opened her mouth, then closed it. A single breath, shallow and shaky. I do. And the world tilted. The courtroom leaned in, chairs creaked, pens stopped mid-sentence. The prosecutor rose with the quiet dignity of someone about to summon ghosts. Eliza, can you tell the court how you first met Mr. Damian Cross? Her lips parted. Her voice, when it came, was little more than a whisper. It was in 2009. I was 22, fresh out of college. I thought it was a dream. She paused. The memory pressed in behind her eyes like a flood threatening its dam. I was escorted to his penthouse. A woman from HR, Vasha, led me in. He opened the door. He was wearing only his underwear. A rustle rippled through the courtroom. He didn't blink, just stared, then smiled. Across the room, Damian Cross sat reclined in his chair, a subtle smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He lifted a styrofoam cup to his lips as though sipping on amusement. Eliza continued, voice thin but steady. Vasha left me there. He took his time dressing. Then we talked. He asked about my goals, my dreams. He said he saw something in me. Charisma, he called it. She shook her head slightly, more at herself than at the court. I got the job. The prosecutor nodded. What was your role? Personal assistant. But not really. I was his shadow. She turned her gaze slightly upward for the first time, toward the jurors. I had to be within sight at all times, no matter what, unless told otherwise. I had to listen for his breath, anticipate his moods, interpret silence, translate glances. I was trained to decode a single sigh. She inhaled deeply, and then, I didn't sleep for 5 days once. He said I didn't deserve to rest if he hadn't rested, One juror leaned forward. "What happened at the end of those 5 days?" the prosecutor asked gently. "I collapsed." Eliza's voice cracked. "My hearing faded. The world sounded like it was underwater. I couldn't see straight. There were lights where there shouldn't have been lights. And then I cried. Loud, ugly sobs. I couldn't stop. I think my body broke down before my spirit could." Silence. Damien adjusted his cufflinks. "I was paid $50,000 a year." Another pause. "And what did your job entail?" the prosecutor asked softly. Eliza didn't look at her. She was staring at something only she could see. Maybe a past self. Maybe the room where it all began. Everything. He once asked me to crack his knuckles while reading a script. Another time he made me iron his shoelaces. A few heads in the gallery turned. Whispers. Frowns. And what would happen if you didn't meet his expectations? Her knuckles turned, white around the puffball. He would curse, belittle me, say I was stupid, useless, humiliate me in front of others, or worse, he would act like I didn't exist. That was worse. I would beg for the yelling back. The lights buzzed. The flickering bulb above her blinked once, then held. "And did he ever hurt you?" The question floated in the air like poison. Eliza did not answer right away. Her breath shivered. "Yes. How?" "He threw things. He threw me. Once. I was bleeding. I asked for a moment to clean up. He screamed, said I disobeyed. And he threw a bowl of spaghetti at my chest." Several gasps. One juror's pen dropped to the floor. "What did you do?" "I ran, but he followed, screaming that I should get out of his house, that I wasn't even worth the pasta he wasted on me." Across the courtroom, Damien smiled again. Small. Cold. The prosecutor stood silent, allowing the weight of the moment to settle like a fog. "Eliza," she asked after a beat, "why are you here today?" Eliza looked up, truly looked for the first time. Her eyes glistened. "Because I have to be. Because silence let it keep happening. Because if I don't speak now, maybe no one ever will." Her fingers tightened on the puffball in her palm. The light bulb above her buzzed once more, then went dark, before the headlines. Before the subpoenas and sketch artists and trembling testimonies, there was just a girl, eager to matter. Eliza remembered her first week like it was written in gold. The penthouse shimmered with glass and chrome. White. Orchids lined the staircase like guards of a temple. She was 22, wearing heels too tight and hope too large for her spine to carry. Damien Cross was not what she expected. He wasn't cold or impatient. He was warm, almost disarmingly so. He cracked jokes, complimented her penmanship, asked where her necklace came from. He said her eyes reminded him of storms at sea. And for a moment she believed him. That first year blurred into a kaleidoscope of city lights and 3 a.m. phone calls, canceled holidays, and adrenaline. She lived on coffee, adrenaline, and scraps of his praise. If he smiled at her, she could float for days. If he ignored her, it felt like suffocation. But something began to twist in the seams. One night, after a 14-hour photo shoot, they returned to the mansion, a vast, echoing place of glass walls and cold tile floors. There were about 40 people, there, drifting through the rooms like silent ghosts. Eliza's body ached, her stomach cramped, and her legs trembled. It was nearly 3 a.m. She was on her period. She hadn't had a break since sunrise, so she turned, quietly, to head upstairs to her guest room. And then she heard him. "Eliza." Damien's voice cracked through the music like a whip. "Yo, girl. I said IHOP. Now. Not whenever you feel like it." "I just need... just a minute," she stammered. "I have to change." "What did I say? Did I tell you could go upstairs? Did I?" His tone was playful at first, but the play burned away like tissue under flame. She felt it then, the warmth of blood trickling down her thigh. She didn't want to say it, not in front of everyone. But he kept going. Louder, sharper, she snapped. "There's blood running down my leg," she said. "I just need to change my tampon." Silence swallowed the room. For a second, even the air stopped. Damien's face didn't move. Then it contorted. Rage, sharp and fast, bloomed across his cheeks. His hand lashed out. In it was a bowl of spaghetti, still hot. He flung it. It shattered against the wall behind her. Sauce splattered her blazer. Pasta clung to her collar like red wounds. He roared, "Get the hell out of my house!" And then he chased her. Through the grand hall, past startled assistants and musicians frozen mid-laugh. Outside, the air was sharp with early autumn cold. Her breath came in clouds. Her shoes slipped on the stone steps. She kept running until the streetlights blurred. She didn't cry. Not until hours later. Not until she was alone. Weeks passed. Nothing changed. Eliza returned. Apologized. Took her. Scolding with a bowed head and bleeding lips, she bit to stay silent. She learned new strategies. How to read the weather in his eyes. How to avoid eye contact when storms brewed. But nothing could prepare her for the night of the hotel. They had flown to Miami for a shoot. The production trailer was stifling, humid, with broken AC. The Wi-Fi was down. Damien barked orders. His music playlist wouldn't load. The film schedule was behind. People were sweating in designer jackets. Eliza did what she always did. She ran to the production assistant, gathered updates, rushed back to Damien. "They said it's being fixed. Should take about 10. He cut her off mid-word. "I didn't ask you to repeat what they said. I told you to fix it. But I'm not. Then call Bill Gates, or get out." He hurled his laptop. It crashed into the wall behind her, missed her head by inches. She stood frozen. The silence after impact was almost louder than the crash itself. He turned away like nothing had happened. Her body adjusted to violence like it was weather. She stopped reacting, stopped speaking. She trained herself to predict the unpredictable, learned to step just far enough out of reach. The punishments became more bizarre. He once made her stand still for 3 hours during a photo shoot, not assisting, not speaking, just standing. Another time, he accused her of stealing his favorite sunglasses, made her empty her purse in front of the whole team. The glasses were later found on his nightstand. He never apologized. He said, "If you didn't take them, you still made me think you did. That's your fault." She learned to nod, to apologize for air she didn't breathe. One day, during a rare moment of silence, she stood in the main living room, adjusting some decor. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Damien's footsteps were light, but she had memorized them. He entered. No words. He picked up a large ice bucket from the bar, full of half-melted cubes, and dumped it on her head. She gasped, gasping as the water soaked her blouse, the ice bouncing off her collarbone like hail. "What was that for?" she whispered. "You looked sleepy." He walked out. In the courtroom, Eliza paused in her testimony. Her eyes had lowered again. Her fingers squeezed the puffball. "I stayed because I thought I was weak," she said softly. "But now I know I was surviving." The prosecutor let the silence hold, then asked, "Did anyone see? Did anyone try to help?" Eliza almost laughed. Quiet and bitter, they saw. But he was the sun. We were just revolving, hoping not to burn. From the gallery someone sniffled. A juror's head tilted. "Eliza, when did you realize this wasn't normal?" She stared straight ahead, voice calm, but hollow. "When I stopped dreaming." There was a certain smell that followed her for years, a blend of musky cologne, melted wax, and something darker, metallic, pungent, clinging to fabric and memory. Long after she left Damien Cross's orbit, Eliza would still wake with the stench in her nostrils, blood and baby oil, like a hotel suite turned battlefield. She never stayed in 5-star rooms again, not after what she witnessed. Eliza sat straighter on the witness stand now, though her voice remained soft, almost brittle. "We called them nightmares, the sweets." The prosecutor asked gently, "Why nightmares?" "Because I had to clean them." A flicker passed through the courtroom. Heads tilted, pens stilled. Eliza took a breath. He would finish with, "Whoever was there," and I would go in after. My job was to make sure no one ever knew what happened. Not housekeeping, not security, not even the air. She paused, lips trembling. There were candles, always dozens of them, some cheap, some designer. Wax splattered everywhere. You couldn't scrape it off the marble. It was in the grout, on the curtains, fused into the carpet. She looked down at her hands. There was oil on the mirrors, on the furniture, on the headboard, and blood. Sometimes, not always, but enough. The gallery sat frozen. "Were you ever told where the blood came from?" the prosecutor asked. Eliza nodded once. Damien said it was period blood, like that, made it less disturbing. She looked up, not at anyone in particular, just above the heads of the jury. I tried not to think about it. I just cleaned. I was the only one he trusted not to talk. One night in particular etched itself into her mind. It was summer, Los Angeles in a heat wave. They had returned from an award show, Damien in a silk shirt half unbuttoned, sweat clinging to his neck. He said nothing, just tossed his jacket at her and walked into the suite. She followed as instructed. There were already candles lit. Music thudded softly from hidden speakers. The air felt thick, like it had been sitting too long, without circulation. "I'll call downstairs for ice," she said. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and said, "Bring the oils." She hesitated. There was a tray, always prepared, lined with small bottles, baby oil, Astroglide, scented massage oils in sleek black glass. She carried it in, hands shaking. That night, she waited outside the door. She heard laughter, moaning, then something crash, a lamp maybe, then a woman scream, not in pleasure. Just a sharp, guttural yelp, then silence. 10 minutes later, Damien opened the door shirtless, sweat on his forehead. He looked at her. "Clean it up." The suite looked like a war zone. Broken glass glittered across the carpet like stars. Towels soaked through. Wax dripped down the mirror like tears. One pillow had what looked like a bloody handprint smeared across the corner. Eliza blinked. She moved like a ghost, gathering towels, soaking up fluids, tossing ruined sheets into trash bags she had stashed in the hallway closet. She said nothing. Thought nothing. It took her 2 hours. At the end, she sprayed air freshener until her throat burned. She stood in the middle of the room and cried without sound. Back in the courtroom, the prosecutor asked, "Did you ever take drugs with Mr. Cross?" Eliza hesitated. Her hands tightened around the puffball. "Yes." Her voice was barely audible. "Not often. I didn't want to. But he expected it sometimes, like a team-building exercise." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "Can you explain?" She nodded. "There was one time. At a festival. Burning Man. A few jurors blinked in recognition. He brought a tray into the tent. Disco lights were on. He had blackout shades covering the RV windows. There were 3 plates lined with white powder. He called it a game." She swallowed hard. "1 was Molly. 1 was cocaine. 1 was ketamine. He didn't say which was which. He said, 'Guess right or lose your mind.'" A chill passed through the gallery. Eliza's voice cracked. "I didn't want to. I tried to fake it, pretended to snort. But he noticed. Got angry. Told me I was ruining the vibe." A long pause. He got close. Too close. Started yelling. Said if I didn't take it, he'd make sure I never came to another event again. That I'd lose access. Lose protection. She looked down. So I did. But when he turned around, I went to the bathroom and blew it out of my nose. I was terrified. I saw what ketamine did to the others. They didn't look human after a while. Just floating shadows. The courtroom remained heavy with silence. "Did you ever witness Mr. Cross harm anyone else?" The question shifted the air. Eliza's fingers curled tighter. "Yes." Her voice dropped lower. "Cassie." There it was. The name that hung in whispers for months. The prosecutor nodded. "Can you tell us more?" Eliza inhaled slowly, as if exhaling might make it too real. "I saw him throw her to the ground. Crack her head open once. I heard her scream in rooms I wasn't allowed to enter. I saw bruises she covered with scarves. Once, I saw her hiding behind a bush outside the mansion, like a child playing hide-and-seek. A single tear slid down Eliza's cheek. She looked up at me, eyes full of terror. And then she shook her head. "Don't look. Don't see me." That's what she meant. Her voice trembled now. "There was one trip. To Turks and Caicos. We all went. Me, Cassie, Damien." She paused, almost recoiling from the memory. "Cassie came bursting into my room in the middle of the night, screaming that he was going to kill her. Her face was swollen. She was barefoot. She said he was drunk, mad." "What did you do?" "We ran." Eliza's voice was hollow. "Down the beach, through the dark. We didn't grab our phones or shoes, just ran. At one point I remember being shocked that the mosquitoes still bit us, even while we were afraid for our lives." Her eyes fluttered shut. "Then we waded into the ocean, got on paddleboards. The tide was strong. There was a storm coming, but we were more afraid of him than the waves." Silence. "What happened next?" Eliza's voice cracked open. "We went back." She opened her eyes. There was nowhere else to go. There are moments in a woman's life where the world splits. For Eliza Monroe, it happened barefoot on a moonlit beach in the Caribbean, sand slicing her heels, breath hitching in panic, her heart pounding like a war drum. The only sounds were crashing waves and Cassie's screams behind her. "He's coming! He's coming!" The words echoed through the humid air like a curse. It was nearly 3 a.m. They had fled through the back patio of the resort, wind tearing at their clothes. Cassie had blood on her lip and a wildness in her eyes Eliza would never forget. She wasn't just running from a man. She was running from the devil they both once mistook for a god. Damian Cross. Eliza's legs burned as they sprinted down the shoreline, sand clinging to their feet like chains. The ocean spread endless and black beside them, shimmering under a swollen moon. But she could hear him, behind them, closer, like a predator not yet tired of the chase. "We need to hide," Cassie gasped, voice splintered with terror. "He's gonna find us, Eliza. We're not safe." Eliza said nothing. She couldn't speak. Her lungs felt like crushed paper. All she could think about was how quickly the night had turned, how it started with music by the pool, cocktails in stemmed glasses, laughter that now felt so hollow it could echo forever. And then, an explosion, a scream, a bottle smashing against a wall. Cassie running down the corridor in tears, her cheek bruised. Damian's voice booming in drunken rage, slurring commands no one dared question. And now, this. 2 women sprinting down a foreign beach, chased not by shadows, but by the very man who had once sworn to protect them like family. The ocean rose higher as they stumbled toward a sandbar. They found 2 abandoned paddleboards lodged in the wet sand, left behind by tourists earlier that day. "We have to go," Cassie whispered. "We have to get out into the water." Eliza hesitated. She looked behind her, saw nothing, but felt everything. The threat still moved like smoke, invisible but suffocating. And in front of her, the ocean. Wild, untamed, dangerous. She had never been a good swimmer, but she had seen Damian Cross angry. And between drowning in the sea or under his hand, she knew which monster she feared more. They shoved the boards into the tide. Wading into the black water was like entering another world. The sea wrapped around her legs like icy hands. Waves lapped hungrily at her thighs. Cassie was ahead of her, paddling on her knees, hair plastered to her face. Eliza struggled to mount her board, the current pushing her sideways. Lightning flashed on the horizon. A storm was coming. "Keep paddling!" Cassie cried. "Don't stop!" Eliza's arms shook. Salt stung her eyes. The paddleboard wobbled with every stroke. Far behind, on the beach, she saw a figure. Damian. He stood with his hands on his hips, scanning the shoreline, and then he started running again, not away, not toward, just back and forth, like a wolf pacing, waiting for weakness. "Do you think he sees us?" Eliza called out. "I don't know," Cassie shouted. "Just keep going." The wind picked up, waves slapped the boards, thunder rolled like distant drums. Rain began in needles, pelting their skin with merciless rhythm. And in the middle of the sea, under the looming clouds, Eliza felt it. The choice. Mother Nature or the devil. There was no safety in either. But there was honesty in the storm. The sea didn't smile at her and lie. It didn't dress itself in diamond watches and fake promises. The sea didn't make you feel special just to break you in half. Damien did. "Eliza, do you want to die out here?" Cassie yelled, voice cracking. "No," Eliza whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "I want to live, but I don't know where that is anymore." The storm crested. The boards bucked beneath them. Lightning shattered the sky, illuminating the beach for just a second. He was gone. The shoreline was empty. No figure, no footprints, only wind and rain and the crashing sea. They paddled in silence for a while longer, drifting. The adrenaline began to fade. Their muscles trembled not from fear, but from cold and exhaustion. The storm passed faster than expected. Eventually, the water calmed. Cassie was the first to speak. "What do we do now?" Eliza stared out at the black horizon, then back at the faint glow of the resort lights. She hated the answer forming in her gut. "We go back." Back on dry land, soaked and shivering, they entered through a side gate. No one questioned them. No one noticed. In Damien's world, invisibility was its own currency. As long as the damage was covered, the bruises concealed, the truth never mattered. Eliza showered in silence that night. Her skin was raw from salt and fear. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, pale, wide-eyed, broken, and she said nothing. To anyone. Ever. In the courtroom, years later, her voice was calm as she relived the moment. "He didn't have to hit us every time. Sometimes just the threat was enough. Sometimes just knowing we had nowhere else to go. That was the real trap." The jurors sat still. One woman had tears in her eyes. The judge's pen paused mid-scratch. The prosecutor took a careful breath. "Eliza, why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you try to leave?" She looked up. Her voice didn't tremble this time. "Because people don't run from kings. They kneel. And I didn't know I was allowed to get back up." The first time it happened, Eliza Monroe didn't scream. She didn't fight, didn't kick, didn't even speak. She froze. Not because she consented, but because her mind had nowhere else to go. It was Damien's 40th birthday. The Plaza Hotel in New York shimmered with gold and marble, the chandeliers weeping light onto a ballroom filled with celebrities, music executives, models draped in satin and empty smiles. Eliza was new, still too hopeful. She had been running errands up and down the elevators all night, managing guest lists, adjusting seating charts, delivering cigars, picking up spilled champagne flutes. The staff called her the little ghost. She was always there, but no one saw her. At around 3 a.m., Damien told her to come upstairs. "Let's talk," he said, too casually. She followed. That's what good assistants did. The penthouse was silent, too silent, the kind of quiet that felt rehearsed. Everyone else had been dismissed. She realized too late. There was no one left. He poured 2 shots of vodka. She took hers. It hit her like a brick. Her balance faltered. Her breath thickened. Her eyes struggled to focus. She blinked. Once. Twice. Damien leaned in. "You've been doing great," he whispered. "I see you. I know I don't say it, but I do." She tried to respond, but her tongue felt like it belonged to someone else. He pressed his palm against the wall beside her head. His other hand slid up the hem of her dress. Eliza blinked again, but now the world had turned soft at the edges, like fabric soaking in water. She remembered the chandelier spinning, the smell of cologne. And then, darkness. I woke up on a chair in the main room, she said to the courtroom. The sun was rising. I was still wearing my dress. I didn't know what had happened, but I knew something had. She didn't look at anyone as she spoke. I didn't tell a soul. I told myself it was an accident, that he was drunk, that I must have misunderstood. She inhaled sharply. I convinced myself to forget. But the forgetting never worked. Not when she returned to Los Angeles and found her bedroom moved upstairs, across the hall from his. Not when she was told not to lock doors. Not when he knocked at 2 a.m., asking for tea. Or silence. And then came the night that erased all doubt. The Beverly Grove mansion was massive, gated, monitored. Still, it felt like a cage. Eliza's room was small, sparsely furnished, with twin bunk beds left over from some long-forgotten guest. She took the bottom bunk. It felt safer that way. Closer to the floor. Easier to run, if she ever could. That night she fell asleep in sweatpants and a hoodie. She hadn't locked the door. She wasn't allowed. Damien's rule. No one locks. Doors in my house. This is my house. You're not a guest. You're part of me. I don't hide from myself. She awoke not to sound, but to weight. Something heavy. Something warm. Something breathing. At first, she thought it was a dream. Then her eyes fluttered open. He was on top of her, not speaking, not shouting, just pressing. His hands moved with mechanical precision. She didn't understand. Her mind screamed, but her mouth stayed shut. She was no longer a person. She was a possession. A surface. I froze, she whispered in the courtroom. I didn't move. I couldn't. A juror wiped tears with the back of her hand. Another leaned back, arms crossed, lips pursed in disbelief. Or fury. The prosecutor didn't interrupt. She let Eliza take her time. I wanted to believe I'd imagined it, Eliza continued. That it wasn't real. That maybe, if I didn't acknowledge it, I could keep surviving. She blinked back tears. But he kept coming back. And it was never the same way twice. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes it was angry. Sometimes it was in hotels. Sometimes in planes. Sometimes I didn't even know where I was. The courtroom sat in suspended silence. Did you ever try to say no? The prosecutor finally asked. Eliza hesitated. No, she said. I never told him no. Not once. Why not? She smiled bitterly. I couldn't even tell him no when he asked for a sandwich. You think I could say no to that? The prosecutor nodded. What were you afraid would happen if you did? That he'd destroy me, fire me, smear me, make the world think I was the crazy one, the ungrateful one, the problem. She paused. And I didn't want to lose everything I had worked so hard to build. This world, his world, was the only thing I had left. The prosecutor stepped closer, her voice softer now. Eliza, did you want any of it? Any of those encounters? No. Were they ever consensual? No. Why are you talking about them now? Eliza looked down at the puffball in her lap, rubbed her thumb over the edge, slow, deliberate. Because I have to. Because silence protects him. And every day I stayed quiet, I knew someone else might be next. At the back of the courtroom, a man stood and exited. He couldn't take it anymore. On the bench across from him, Damien sat still, not blinking, not smiling. His fingers tapped a slow, steady rhythm on the armrest of his chair. He looked like someone bored with a show he had already seen. That night, Eliza sat alone in her apartment. She lit no candles. She kept the lights on. She locked every door, and still, she did not sleep, because silence may protect predators, but it also cages the prey. No microphone could soften the sound of truth. Eliza Monroe sat on the witness stand, her hands clasped in her lap, the tiny puffball from her keychain nestled between her fingers like an anchor. The room was silent, not out of respect, but from the gravity pulling every breath into stillness. The prosecutor's voice was low, but firm. Eliza, was there ever a time you initiated sexual contact with Mr. Cross? No. Her answer came without hesitation. Did you ever want to? No. The silence was thick now, the kind that does not wait to be filled, but demands reflection. Did you ever tell him no? No. I couldn't. Why not? Eliza's fingers tightened. She looked up, just for a moment, eyes flickering toward the jury box. Because I couldn't tell him no about anything. Not food, not sleep, not even air. Her voice trembled, but the words were clear. If I had told him no, I would have been marked. I wouldn't have been safe. He would have made sure the world saw me as the threat. At the defense table, Damien Cross leaned back in his chair, his thumb resting on his jaw, index finger curled over his mouth like a man pondering the weather. His left leg bounced, slow, calculated. He didn't blink. Eliza noticed, but did not falter. The prosecutor continued. Did he ever threaten to make you look complicit? Yes. In what way? He said he'd tell everyone I wanted it, that I orchestrated it, that I was unstable, that I used him. Her voice dropped. And if he said it, they would believe him. Because he was him. A few jurors shifted in their seats. The older man in the second row leaned forward, elbows on knees, his brow furrowed. The woman next to him sat straighter, arms crossed tightly, fingers tapping her elbow. The prosecutor softened her tone. Eliza, when Mr. Cross assaulted you, did you tell anyone? No. Why not? I planned to die with it. The words dropped like stones into a still lake. I didn't want anyone to know. Not ever. Not my friends. Not my family. Not even myself. I buried it. I thought if I never said it out loud, maybe it would just dissolve. And yet, you're speaking now. Eliza nodded. Slowly. Yes. Why? Her eyes rose, gaze steady for the first time. Because I have to tell the truth, all of it. And because I know that silence lets men like him keep going. A beat of silence. Because if I don't say it now, I'll never be free. From the gallery, soft sobs echoed, barely audible, like strings played too gently. Across the courtroom, a defense attorney shifted a stack of papers. Damien rubbed his temple, exhaling through his nose like a man growing impatient with bad weather. The judge adjusted his robe but said nothing. The weight of Eliza's words did the rest. The prosecutor approached the lectern again. Earlier you mentioned that you felt terrified, confused, ashamed, that you felt it was your fault. Yes. And do you still believe that? Eliza hesitated. I believed it for years. I let him carve that idea into my bones. That I was the problem. That if I had been smarter, stronger, less trusting, it wouldn't have happened. She paused. But I don't believe that anymore. Her voice broke slightly. I know what he did. I know what I felt. And I know now that it wasn't my shame to carry. The room shifted. The energy changed. Something unseen moved through the air like a curtain lifting. A moment passing from darkness to dusk. The prosecutor gave a final nod and returned to her seat. The judge looked toward the defense table. Cross-examination? Pause. Then, the smooth voice of Carter Fielding, Damien's lead defense attorney, cut through the quiet like a scalpel. Yes, Your Honor. We're ready. He stood slowly, straightened his lapels, walked toward the witness stand with the calm confidence of a man who believed charm could undo trauma. Eliza, he said, smiling slightly, you've been through a lot. She said nothing. You've described horrible things, truly, and we want to respect that. But before we move further, I want to ask you a few things. Simple things. He lifted a folder, flipped it open. Is this your Instagram account? Eliza looked at the screen he held up. Her throat tightened. Yes. And you posted this photo? Yes? With Mr. Cross at a coffee shop? Yes. The caption reads, just the #1 guy on the Forbes list getting me a vanilla latte. No big deal. Regular people. You wrote that? Yes. Carter smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Eliza, that's a very friendly post about the man you now accuse of assault. Eliza straightened slightly. I was trained to make him look untouchable. That's what he paid me for. And this photo? Carter tapped to the next exhibit. It showed Eliza in a hospital gown, smiling, while Damien pretended to deliver a baby from under her gown. It was from a comedy skit they had once filmed. You posted this. Thank you for always letting me give birth to my dreams. Correct? Eliza blinked slowly. Yes. And Mr. Cross, your alleged abuser, is smiling while you both play, along with a staged birth. You captioned it with gratitude and admiration. Am I wrong? Eliza's voice remained even. I was surviving. A few jurors turned their heads. Carter narrowed his eyes slightly. Forgive me, but it seems inconsistent. Joy, smiles, praise, laughter. Is that how someone treated so terribly would behave? Eliza leaned forward for the first time. Her voice, cut like glass. You don't get to define how I coped. You weren't there when I was alone in hotel rooms, scrubbing blood off headboards. You weren't there when I smiled for cameras while wondering if I'd ever get out. A pause. You weren't there when I learned how to smile like it was armor. The courtroom held its breath. Carter Fielding said nothing for a long moment. Then, he nodded, closed his folder. No further questions, Your Honor. The judge turned. We will recess until tomorrow morning. The gavel struck once, and just like that, Eliza Monroe had finally been heard. Not just with words, but with truth. The next morning, the courtroom felt colder. Not in temperature, but in tension. as if the very walls knew what was coming. The defense team had stacked folders neatly in front of them, labeled, tabbed, weaponized. Eliza Monroe sat back in the witness box, her puffball absent. She had left it behind that morning. Today, she wouldn't need it. Carter Fielding rose with practiced calm. A silver tie, a soft smile, an actor ready for his scene. "Eliza," he began, "I'd like to revisit some of your social media activity during the years you worked for Mr. Cross. Would that be all right?" She nodded once. No emotion. "Good," he said, flipping a page. "Let's begin with this post. November 4th, 2013. He turned the screen. It showed a now infamous image. Eliza in a hospital gown. Damien kneeling between her legs as if delivering a baby. A comedy sketch. The caption read, "Last non-birthday shout-out to my mentor, my real Damien Cross. Thank you for always letting me give birth to my dreams." Gasps murmured through the room. "Ms. Monroe, this was posted publicly on your personal account, correct?" "Yes. And?" "The man in this picture, the one you now accuse of serial assault, is smiling with you, joking, celebrating." "Yes." "So let me ask," he said, pausing for effect. "Were you assaulted before or after this photo was taken?" Eliza stared at the screen. Before. Carter's brow furrowed. Yet here you are, smiling, grateful, publicly praising the man you claim violated you. She leaned forward, voice steady. "Yes. Because no one listens to a crying woman in a courtroom unless she smiled through it first." He blinked. A few jurors shifted. "Eliza, you admit this image is contradictory. It suggests warmth, affection, maybe even admiration." "It suggests survival," she replied. "It suggests branding. I was his assistant, his shadow, his mirror. If," he smiled, "I had to laugh. If he wanted admiration, I had to give devotion. Otherwise, I was disposable." Carter moved to the next slide, another photo. Eliza in a party dress, standing close to Damien at a rooftop event. Her head tilted toward him, both holding drinks. July 2015. Hamptons. Did you post this? Yes. Caption reads, "Legend. In the making. What an honor." Eliza didn't flinch. "I was playing my role. And what role was that? The one that kept me safe." Carter's tone sharpened, barely perceptible. "You claim years of violence. Yet you smiled, partied, posted. Isn't it possible you're misremembering things? That you're reinterpreting ordinary memories through a lens of recent anger?" Her eyes narrowed. "I remember what happened in hotel rooms. I remember the weight of him on top of me. I remember cleaning up blood and candles and pretending it was normal. No filter or caption changes that." Her voice rose. "You want to talk about images? Let's talk about the bruises I never photographed. The nights I deleted messages so no one would see what he said to me at 2 a.m. She paused. "You're showing them the surface. I'm giving them the truth." The courtroom rippled. Even the judge leaned slightly forward now, lips pursed. Carter straightened his spine. "Let's talk about your behavior post-employment. You left Mr. Cross's staff in 2017. True?" "Yes." "And did you file any complaint? That year?" "No." 2018? No. 2019, 2020? No. So, Ms. Monroe, we are expected to believe that you endured all this, yet said nothing, did nothing, for nearly half a decade? Her reply was a whisper. but it cut deeper than any shout. I said nothing because I thought no one would believe me. She looked toward the jury. Because you don't say a king is a monster while he's still sitting on the throne. Another beat. A young man in the jury box nodded, slowly, his face unreadable. Carter's lips pressed together. He adjusted his cuffs, shuffled the papers, but the rhythm had shifted. The cross was no longer a blade. It had become a mirror, and Eliza had stopped running from her reflection. He moved on. One last question, he said, voice lower now. Are you seeking financial compensation through any civil suit? No. Book deal? Media rights? No. He nodded. Thank you, Ms. Monroe. He returned to his table, quieter than when he'd left it. The judge cleared his throat. Redirect? The prosecutor stood. She didn't approach. She didn't need to. Eliza, she asked, do you feel ashamed for smiling in those old photos? Eliza paused. The courtroom held its breath. No, she said. I feel proud I survived them. When court adjourned, the room didn't explode in noise. It simply exhaled. Eliza stepped down from the stand. Her steps were slow, but deliberate. She walked past Damian Cross without looking at him. He, meanwhile, sat still, but his foot tapped faster now. The man who once filled every room like a god, now just a figure behind a nameplate, and the woman he tried to erase. She had finally taken her name back. The day of closing arguments arrived in silence. Not the sterile silence of legal protocol, but something deeper. The kind of hush that clings to the air before a storm, when the wind refuses to speak, and even the birds seem to hold their breath. Eliza. Monroe sat in the front row, no longer a witness, but not yet free. She wore a simple navy blouse. No makeup, no jewelry, no armor, only her name. That was all she had left. And now, finally, it was enough. The prosecutor stood before the jury, her tone even, her hands still. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard from Eliza Monroe. You've heard about the violence, the fear, the years of silence carved into her skin like invisible scars. She paused, allowing the room to settle into the weight of her words. But this case is not just about bruises you could not see. It's about power. About a man who built an empire on the silence of others, and a woman who finally broke hers. The jurors looked on, some leaning forward, some sitting frozen. She didn't come here for revenge. She came for truth. She sat in that witness chair and handed you her pain, unfiltered, unguarded. And what did the defense offer in return? A smile in a photograph, a hashtag, a joke. The prosecutor let that hang, as if survival discredits suffering, as if pretending to be okay means nothing happened. Her voice softened. But Eliza did what millions of women wish they could do. She walked through the fire and brought the truth back with her. A final breath. She gave you the truth. Now give her justice. Carter Fielding stood slowly, smoothed his tie, walked toward the jury. He spoke for 17 minutes, talked of doubt, of ambiguity, of inconsistent memory, of perception versus reality. He never said Eliza lied. He didn't have to. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. Eliza waited in a small conference room with the prosecutor. She drank water she couldn't swallow and stared out a window that overlooked a gray parking lot. She thought of all the windows she had stared out over the years, Hotel suites, blacked-out limos, beach houses behind gates so high they blotted out the sky. And she thought of the one time she told herself she didn't want to die, but didn't want to live like that anymore. The door creaked open. A bailiff appeared. "They have a verdict." The courtroom filled quickly. Reporters. Family. Strangers holding each other's hands like it might change the outcome. Eliza sat alone. The judge returned. The jury entered. A young woman in the front row of the jury box clutched the verdict, slip with trembling fingers. The clerk read aloud. "In the matter of Monroe versus Cross, on the charge of assault in the first degree, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty." Gasps broke the silence, then stillness, not celebration, just release. Eliza felt her lungs expand in a way they hadn't in years. She didn't cry. Not then. Not when the cameras flashed. Not when Damian Cross was led out of the courtroom in cuffs, his mouth tight, jaw twitching, his eyes no longer scanning the room like a king surveying his kingdom, but like a man seeing the bars for the first time. She didn't cry when reporters shouted her name. She didn't even cry when Cassie, standing at the back of the courtroom, offered her a slow, tearful nod. But she cried in the car, alone, when no one was watching. And for the first time, they were not tears of shame. 3 months later, Eliza Monroe stood in a recording booth, not for a podcast, not for a documentary, but for herself. She was narrating a message, one that would live forever in the place Damian once owned, the industry. The sound of her voice was calm, clear, laced with steel. If you're hearing this, maybe you're like I was, trapped behind someone's power, smiling for cameras, laughing in interviews, pretending. But I want you to know, you are allowed to stop pretending. You are allowed to say no. And if your story sounds like mine, you are not alone, not anymore. In the final frame of the video, she did not appear, only her words, and a black screen with white text. Eliza Monroe survived. This is her beginning. Then a soft fade to black. And just before the screen cut, subscribe for more stories that need to be heard. No fireworks, no clickbait, just truth, spoken aloud, at last.